My name's Eleanor Machin. I'm from Sheffield.
I'm Phil Jackson, and I'm a postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Chemical and Biological Engineering. I come from Lytham St Anne's, which is on the Lancashire coast, just south of Blackpool.
I'm Jack. I'm from Pitsmoor, which is about a mile away as the crow flies.
So I'm David Hyatt. I'm a lecturer in the School of Education. My accent, I think, is a South Wales accent.
My name's Dr. Bernice Golding. I am from Huddersfield. I was born in Huddersfield and I have a Huddersfield accent. I'm a lecturer in social sciences and health and community development at the University of Huddersfield.
Okay, my name is Amy Stone. I'm from Stoke-on-Trent and I work as an administrator in the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health.
I'm Ray Hearn. I'm from Parkgate, which is just outside Rotherham. I'm a freelance writer and I write songs and poems and performer and singer. So I suppose my basic raw material is language.
I have to be articulate. That was a good start, wasn't it? Right. I have to be articulate in my current position.
I'm a specialist tutor for people with specific learning difficulties, so that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, ADHD. I do a lot of work on spelling, phonetics. Dyslexics particularly do have problems with differentiating sounds, so I have to be very careful how I talk with the students, so I just need to take care.
I need to be articulate because I need to be able to convey messages to my students, to the learners, in a way that they will actually be able to understand and make sense of them to aid their own learning and their development as students here.
I feel a little bit sometimes uncomfortable with my accent because people have said, "Oh, you don't sound like a teacher." And I think, well, what's a teacher sound like then?
I really think that having an accent still seems to be part of a profile of what you expect certain people to be like, to act like, part of behaviour. And
yeah, I just get the feeling that it makes me sound not as professional. You know, that you don't sound like a teacher. Well, what do I sound like then? And you know, even my other half said, "Oh, you sound like a fishwife," you know, that kind of thing. So it almost makes me feel like if you've got an accent like me, you're not actually that intelligent. Or
another member of staff said that I spoke like a Doncaster fishwife. I don't even know what that means. I don't think we have that many fishwives in Doncaster. I don't really know what it means.
Occasionally I've met people who think it's okay to make comments, either positive, negative, or in their eyes humorous comments about where I'm from on the basis of speaking with a regional accent. And it's as if having a regional accent gives them permission to do so, regardless of the fact it may be judged by some people as being quite intrusive.
For a short period of time I actually lived out of the United Kingdom. I lived in Jamaica. When I came back and re-entered the mainstream school system here, I actually spoke really differently. I didn't speak like I was northern, I didn't speak like I was from Huddersfield. I spoke with a very strong Jamaican dialect. And I remember being asked to read out in the English class as part of our learning. And I remember being laughed at afterwards. And it suddenly made me realise that not only did I sound differently, people actually thought it was quite amusing, and that upset me for a time.
Certainly, when I was at school, I was often considered to be the kid that talked posh at my junior school in Pitsmoor, and then when I went across town to school, I was one of the common as muck kids.
The school was in Sheffield, so it was a kind of lad from the sticks, lad from the coal field kind of accent. And I was very conscious of that for many years, and I felt that I was inferior really.
In class, when we had to speak, I found that whenever I spoke, my vowels would be copied. So say I'd say, or a bit of dialect, so if I said inte, somebody would copy inte around the room like a little echo. And really the impact that had was that it made me silent in seminars. So I then spent 3 years just listening a lot, which is no bad thing, but not really saying very much.
I began my educational journey, I suppose, as an EFL teacher. And during an initial teacher education course I was on, the trainer told me that I was probably going to make a very good teacher, but the one thing that may count against me would be my accent. And he recounted a story of another trainee who'd had a strong Scottish accent in his terms, who'd had students who found her difficult to understand. Now, reflecting back on that, in 31 years of working with international students from a huge variety of different locations, I've never had a problem being understood by students. Ironically, occasionally I have had problems being understood by English colleagues in that environment, despite the fact that they are themselves language teachers.
I wasn't interviewed when I came to be, I didn't have an interview when I came to Sheffield. I had an interview at other universities. I don't know if I should say which other university, but I know that my accent was remarked upon in 1 or 2 of those interviews. And the places that didn't offer me places, they remarked upon my accent, and I thought, oh, what does that mean exactly? So, probably did mean that they made assumptions about me. Yeah, maybe maybe my accent was stronger when I was 18.
I went to school, got bullied for it because I talked different to how they did. So I used to try and consciously stoke up my accent, like make it more like a Stoke accent. And since then I've kind of just been able to flip between different accents. And I've found that when I talk normally, as I would talk in the workplace, people can kind of be a bit judgmental and they definitely treat you differently if you have an identifiable accent or some sort of accent that's not just RP.
When I had a 2-year position in Oxford, at the University of Oxford, where when I first arrived, the big surprise that I had was that almost all the native English speakers that were in the department had an RP accent. I couldn't really get into any social circles with anybody who was English and had an RP accent. All the people I socialised with and went drinking with after work, for example, were either the Australians, the Italians, the Swiss, the Austrians, the Scots, etc., etc. So although I didn't suffer any active discrimination, I had the distinct impression that I didn't fit in to the RP speaking English people. And the only thing I can think of is because I spoke English in a slightly different way.
When I was a cleaner in the Arts Tower when I was an undergraduate, and I went up to the 15th floor to borrow a buffer from Pat, who said to me, she was asking me about how my studies were going and whatever, and she said, oh, I wish I'd done English because you speak lovely English, you do, you speak like the Queen. And from my cleaning job, which finished, I did 7 till 10 every day, I went to my morning seminar in which we were doing the poetry of the miners' strike, and the lecturer said to me, oh Jack, you've got a proper northern accent, can you do Barnsley? And got me to read out this poem about the miners' strike. And that's kind of, it was the perfect, it was the epitome of how my accent is in certain circumstances. It makes me judged certain ways.
I was doing a training session and we had to get into groups, and we were doing this like little acting thing, and the group next to us, they were kind of taking the mick out of kitchen, well, I don't know any particular kitchen staff, but you know, people in catering who serve the students meals, and they were really taking the mick out of the broad Yorkshire accent. What they were actually saying was making these here people that they were acting sound stupid. And I thought, why do these people who don't know very much suddenly have to have this, well, more like a Barnsley accent, really, really strong accent? And I thought that's off that really sounds like they're making fun of the accent. I don't like that. They're in Sheffield. They should accept that that's a natural thing.
And certainly had an unusual experience recently at a conference where a doctoral student from another university was introduced to me. I've never spoken to her before in my life, never met her before in my life, but obviously the very fact that I had an accent had become news. It was part of my reputation, because when she was introduced to me, she said, "In it," and then completely ignored me and cut me out of my own conversation with another colleague. And I found that absolutely astonishing and so offensive, because I'd never met this person before, and it wasn't intended as a joke. It was very much intended as something to make me feel uncomfortable and cut me out of a conversation.
The day where I was kind of not, I mean, it didn't have an impact on me in a negative way at all, but to be seen in one light by one person and then so shortly afterwards to be seen in a very different light by someone else really brought home to me how significant it is. And you don't really think about your accent. It's not a conscious choice. You might naturally moderate it depending on your surroundings, but it's just what comes out of your mouth. And yet people make such big judgments about you based on how you sound.
I'm just very aware of it from things that other people have said, and then I think, oh, I need to check myself, because if I talk like I talk, I'm different.
People make judgments about how intelligent, how capable, how serious a person you are in some ways based on their perception of how articulate you are.
For me, articulate is down to how you communicate rather than particularly down to what your accent is and how you talk. If you're articulate, you've got, as far as I'm concerned, you've got a broad vocabulary, you can communicate clearly with people. I mean, you could even go so far as to say being articulate is having the good body language to go with your spoken communication. So I don't see being articulate as really anything to do with your accent.
To me, it means it's about the way we speak. It's about the way we're able to convey a message, and convey that message in a way that people actually can make sense of what's being said, and that it becomes meaningful for them. And I don't think that involves an accent.
But I think sometimes people can deliberately pretend not to understand you, and they clearly can. They just kind of don't like the way that you're talking, or they assume because you're talking with an accent or in a dialect that you're a bit dense. That is often my experience of it.
But actually we don't understand accents because we're not exposed to them. If we're exposed to a variety of accents regularly, we'd have no problem understanding them. So as far as I'm concerned, that's not a good enough argument to suggest to people that they need to change a very, very significant and integral part of their identity just for the sake of other people's issues.
Articulate is certainly not something that I think is tied to accent in an odd way. I think having an accent can make people more articulate. They kind of express a greater diversity of experience.
Really, that many of us speak in many different kinds of dialects or idiomatic discourses, depending on who we're with and what we want to say. And that being articulate has got nothing to do with accent. I suppose that's what I want to say. I think I do believe in the accident of accent.
Lots of people have commented that I actually don't have a very strong accent at all. So even this idea that you do and don't have an accent seems to be this thing that other people decide and judge, rather than something that's part of my identity and where I'm from, where my family live, where the people I love live.
The tongue in your head is a very strong signifier of your identity, and people, whether they mean to or not, will make a lot of assumptions about you based on your accent.
You know, I'm very proud of being from Huddersfield and sounding like I come from Huddersfield, and I don't think people should let what their accent sounds like put them off from aspiring to be who they want to be, Because if I'd let my accent stop my aspirations, then I actually wouldn't be in the position I am today. And I think that's really, really important, that perhaps we should worry less about what we sound like and where we come from. And it's about how we articulate. It's about those messages. It's about how we communicate in everyday life, without the need for us all to speak in a certain way to actually be accepted.
You might hear from a teacher, int, dictionary. And so your response obviously is, oh, int it.